If I were on that show today, it would be a very different experience because I'd be a very different version of who I am.
Basketball Wives defined her. Plotline, NBA bad boy, drama queen, toxic love.
Do you have regrets?
I think if you had asked me that question like right after the show, the answer would have been like, absolutely.
Now, shedding the past, Gloria Govan is redefining herself in a much different way.
Take us from the show to today. What happened all in there that has made you this powerhouse CEO?
I gave myself permission to just kick down some doors. I realized that I relied a lot on what he was giving me, and I hated that feeling. And I vowed, I think at that point, that I wasn't gonna put myself in that position again.
In this episode of Game Day with Shay, Gloria holds nothing back as we talk career and home life.
I'm learning to use my voice a little bit more.
Surviving.
I feel like I've already lived. If I was a cat, I've already lived like 6 lives.
Even similarities between her past and the recent Bachelorette blow-up.
What do you tell your kids? Do they ever ask? Do you ever talk about it with them?
Welcome to Game Day with Shay, where sports meets design. I'm Shay Holland, HGTV designer and sports journalist. This is the show where your home, your style, and your love of the game finally get to play on the same team. Hit subscribe and let's dive into this episode.
Welcome back to Game Day with Shay. I'm Shay Holland, your host, and I am so excited for this conversation today. I have with me Gloria Govan, and I'm just gonna get started right away on this conversation because I think that she's got a lot you guys are gonna wanna hear. Gloria.
Hi, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I'm so glad we can get this done. I'm so appreciative.
I'm so glad that you're in the house.
Yes.
And this is just gonna be a free-flowing conversation. Cool. Not really sure where we're gonna go with it, but I wanna start with, some people will know you and some people won't, obviously. So let's start with who Gloria is today. Who are you today, Gloria?
Oh, thank you for asking that question. You know, and that's a very interesting way to answer it. I find myself always kind of answering it from a mother's perspective. And so I get people being like, no, that's cool. I know that you have 5 kids, but like, who are you? And I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm very ambitious. I'm, you know, trying to create generational wealth and something tangible that I do want my kids to have. But I am a mom. You know, I'm undoubtedly a mom. I'm a daughter of my parents. You know, they came here. My mom's from Mexico. My dad's from here. I'm the youngest of 10.
Wow.
I know. They've been together for 54 years. The same parents and the whole 9. But I'm really just trying to figure that out. Like, who am I today?
Okay, so let's go back to Gloria growing up.
Yes.
Who was Gloria as a girl?
Oh my goodness, I was a tomboy. So I have 6 brothers. And I always kind of joke that I was like raised by wolves because my parents were so busy. My parents were in the education system. My dad was a principal. My mom was she worked her way up from a secretary to a principal. And then they owned a jazz venue and a nightclub. So I had a job at 10. I was washing dishes in a restaurant at 10. I became a waitress at 12 and a bartender at 17. And I feel like back in the day, though, they didn't really, like, child labor laws didn't exist. Right. And I feel like I know that my parents had kids so that we could work. And so I was working. I've just been that way my whole life. But what I appreciate, and I think what really like brought us together is kind of this connection through sport. And I've played sports my entire life, whether it was kickball, like I was always that tomboy. I hated my hair combed, but my sister always used me as her little doll. So I was always well put together. But like by the time I came home, girl, you know, it was like one ponytail's over here and the other, you know, dress all dirty. But I played all the sports that my brother played. So I was a lot of times the only girl on the baseball team, only girl on the basketball team, flag football. And a lot of times I remember I asked my dad if I could cheerlead for my brother's football team, and he was like, "No, but you can play." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So it's been ingrained. All of my brothers and sisters played sports. My dad was a coach. It's just something that's just in my DNA.
Yeah, we have so many similarities. We didn't have as many kids as you. We had about half of it, but
yeah. Girl, it's so rare these days, especially. Yeah. People are like, "I come from a big family." I'm like, "Oh, how many?" And they'll be like, "Oh, 3." And I'm like, Oh.
Right.
Cute.
Yeah, and the sports thing was huge. I mean, I think for us it was definitely the glue, and it was my dad's love with sports. He used to, he was on the way to the NFL before he got, and went into the military. So I totally relate to everything you're saying just about the tomboy. It was just that love of sports.
Yeah.
I think that, I know for me, kept me out of trouble too.
Girl.
Was that the same for you?
What? Thank God for sports. Thank God for sports and no social media. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure I'd be in jail. It just kept you structured, and that's what I really, really, really love. Like, I didn't necessarily have time to kind of like get in trouble because I was just busy. And back then, we played 3 sports all year. When your soccer season was over, you moved on. When basketball was over, I ran track. Before basketball, I played volleyball. It's just kind of what we did. We didn't get into specialized sports just as much as they do today.
Yeah.
So it was year round.
Yeah.
Year round.
And it sounds like you passed that on to your kids.
Oh, yes. I did. You had mentioned, so we have 5 kids. Derek has brought 3 into the relationship, and I've brought 2. We've been together now 12 years, so they're all mine. And it was just interesting because when we first got together, his kids didn't play sports. And so I found that really, really kind of difficult at first because I was like, well, what do they do? How do you keep them busy? Like, what do you do in the summer? Like, what do y'all talk about? It was just like, my goodness. And so eventually the middle 2 twins, so I'll break it down. So we have a 23-year-old. She's going to be a senior in college. She goes at UNLV. Our middle set of twins, boy-girl twins. Our daughter goes to Spelman. Our middle son plays basketball in Chicago. So it's going to loop around, I promise. It'll point to this. And then our younger boys are identical twin boys, and they play basketball. So my boys have always been athletic. They soccer, golf, track, like girl. They ski, surf. Like, I've had them. We're going to do this. Like, this is what we're going to do. And not because sports defines them, but I just knew it gave them structure, leadership, communication, how to deal with adversity, all of these things. And so when I met Derek's kids and they didn't necessarily weren't into sports, I was like, oh, this is gonna be interesting. Eventually, our middle daughter ended up playing softball and basketball, and she chose softball, and then our middle son went on to play basketball in college. But it was hard. That was a hard adjustment for me. So that was an interesting kind of conversion into having to talk about sport, having to then deal with people that maybe weren't necessarily familiar or just kind of, didn't have that in common with me. And that was a learning curve for me.
Yeah. You mentioned so much that I just want to dive into.
I know, I'm stop talking.
I love it. No, just keep talking because you said something about you didn't want sports to define them. And that just really resonated with me for some reason because you obviously have been in the NBA world for a long time. You're married to a former Laker who's a coach. Do you feel like that defines you?
Oh gosh, yes, unfortunately. I think that particular portion of my life defines me, especially being in front of the camera on Basketball Wives. I think that really, really took a toll on the perception of who I am. And that has followed me for a long time. And I've had to work really hard to just try to change that. And it was a blessing. It's a blessing now that I look at it, but I didn't necessarily see it that way, while I was in it, because I was in the eye of the tornado. And it's really hard to try to get people to believe who you really are. I think people end up, they're not willing to spend the time to kind of get to know you, and they really want to just believe what they want to believe in such a short period of time. And because those Basketball Wives it's reality TV, but it's still produced, right? Sorry to break your guys' bubble. But they still manufacture it a little bit. And so it just kind of, and I was young, I was 22, 23, so I didn't even know who I was. And I'd already had 2 kids, and so I was a baby raising babies, and it was just a really big transition for me. And to play that out in front of millions of people was just really difficult. And I didn't understand that type of, how to control the narrative back then. And so that was really interesting for me.
Do you have regrets?
I think if you had asked me that question right after the show, the answer would have been absolutely. And as a matter of fact, I'm sure you can find interviews of me being I hated it there. Looking back at it now, though, it was a really great experience. I really did learn a lot. I've been able to find my silver linings in it and go, okay, that was crazy, or I don't like that, or wow. But I grew up out of it, out of just really dealing with adversity. It just allowed me to take a look back, realize what I do and don't like. There's 1,000 things I wish I could have changed. If I were on that show today, it would be a very different experience because I'd be a very different version of who I am. Yeah. I'd be a little bit more grown and experienced or seasoned. But yeah, no, the show at the time was hard. It was really hard because of the fallout. It was really hard because I had no clue what I was doing, how to deal with social media, how to take reign of my narrative. I just let people run with who they thought I was or who, they kind of perceived me to be. I had no control, and that I hate. I absolutely hated that. I hate that part of version of me in that show. But I would do it again.
Oh, really?
Today I would do it again.
Okay, because I've heard some rumors.
Oh, no. I'm not going to do it again, but I would do it again. And I was asked to go back a couple times. But I also knew, like, at the time, even then, 5 years ago, I wasn't necessarily ready. I didn't want to take a chance. I was kind of building something a little different. And I couldn't let that sidetrack me. But just especially because it's an ensemble cast, so you don't have control over who would say something or paint you in a light, or and the way they get to edit it and cut it and all the things. So it's kind of like, I'm okay.
Yeah, because you were in a very volatile relationship, of course, at the time too. So I was thinking of you because of all this whole Bachelorette situation.
Yeah. What is her name?
Parks is her last name.
Thank you. In the video, right?
Yeah.
She was like throwing stuff. Oh.
Yeah. Oh my God, girl.
So there's the thing. I did everything I could to protect my kids. So I was very quiet about it. And it sucks because in the beginning of our relationship, I pressed charges. And then people around me were kind of like, you don't want to ruin his life because then it's going to make your life more difficult. And I hate myself for hearing that narrative, because then I went back and I supported him and I dropped the charges and we got back together. And I've never been able to shake that portion of my response. People go, well, you backed him. You showed up. You hand in hand in the courtroom. And it's just kind of like, And so whenever I would, say anything later, it was like the girl that cried wolf. And so that was hard. It was hard to navigate, that story, that part of my life without support. What I will say, when I saw the video for The Bachelorette, I don't condone violence by any means from a woman or a man. But I did feel like it just felt like it was a reaction to something that maybe was like manufactured. And I've been there. I've been set up before, to the point where then you kind of get baited into a reaction. And then that reaction's really bad. I mean, my ex-husband's a big man, right? And so I didn't necessarily, even if there was bait, I wasn't winning that fight. So I just found, I do find it interesting. Because I don't know her kind of experience as the person who's been baited before and then kind of set up in terms of like the capturing of the reaction, and not the what happened before, not the slaps before, not the things before. I just don't know how I don't know if I can honestly judge that video yet. I don't condone it, especially with the babies around.
Right. Not with the kids. Not in front of the kids.
When the kid, and that's the thing.
Take it out of the house.
Girl,
go to the garage.
I remember being dragged down the stairs by my hair, and I didn't say shit. You didn't hear a peep from me because the kids were sleeping. So when I saw the kids, I was like, or I heard the baby in the background crying, I was like, damn, that hurt. I was like, no, So that one was tough, but I wonder, I wonder how that's going to play out.
What would you say to a woman who is in a similar situation? Because you've learned so much. Come out the other side of it.
Yeah. What would I say? I would tell him or her, honestly, that they deserve more, that they're worth more, And I know I've spoken to survivors. I've spoken to women and men that have stayed in circumstances and things like that. And what I've found to be a common thread is that they feel like that is an acceptable version of love. And that hurts. You're kind of like, oh man, because that's embedded. That runs something a little deeper than, something that's kind of, you got to take a look back at their past or things like that. And, it's crazy because I do have 6 brothers. So in reality, like, I can throw down if I need to. But it was just funny because I remember even my dad, like my family found out with the public. And so they all were like, like if you didn't say anything, like they were upset that I didn't say anything. And so I would say to somebody, like, you would be surprised. I think a lot of judgment kind of shelters or prohibits people from really speaking out, but you'd be surprised how many people are supportive, because then you kind of get that, like, well, why'd you stay? Well, why now? Kind of even that Cesar Chavez. People are like, well, why is Dolores 95 saying something now? And it's like, well, why not? Like, why does she have to go to the grave with that? And I understand, like, I get it, but I don't. Because I'm kind of like, but I do. Again, going back to your original question, I would say to them that you would be surprised how much love and support there is out there. And I would just say, try to do some internal work. I think the acceptance of that behavior is more like kind of a personal thing than anything else. And if you can keep it away from the kids, like, oh, man, it's hard because you don't want your kids forward facing for it, but it's also hard to hide because it creates a version of you that's not whole. And so your kids don't get the whole version of you, or the kind of the real version of your love and things like that. So if you can kind of break the cycle, my God, I pray that you find the strength,
Yeah. Now, I love how you are redefining yourself, is what I would call it. You've done a fabulous job, because now you mentioned at the beginning, you're an entrepreneur, you're building these businesses. So take us from the show to today. What happened all in there that has made you this powerhouse CEO?
Oh, thank you. A lot of growth. And I got with Derek 12 years now. And it's just so funny because I spent my 20s with Matt. I, spent my 30s with Derek, and I just recently turned 40. And so that transition, kind of the allowance to, I allowed myself to grow and make those mistakes. And I did so with full transparency, with those around me, my boundaries. Boundaries was a hard one for me because I'm naturally a people pleaser. Being the youngest in a large family, I had to kind of figure out how to make myself visible. And so because of that, I had to learn to rewire myself. And so my 20s was kind of like, it was volatile, but it was fun. I can't complain. But, we traveled, we were, we were blessed. There are things I didn't need or want for anything. We lived in beautiful homes. We traveled the world. My kids were great. I had everything I wanted, materialistically at least. And so in my 30s, I kind of, shook more of the materialism of it. The boys were getting older. And I started to realize that I wasn't necessarily building or leaving anything for them. And so my mind and my shift in the way that I was approaching things started changing. And so this idea of generational wealth really started to have an imprint on me. My parents tried it, and they've always done a great job, but they didn't necessarily train us in a way to take over the family business. It was just always kind of, I think we wanted to, but not the way my dad would. And so it kind of dissolved. And so but I love that concept of leaving something, leaving a legacy, but not just look, I can't give my kids my followers. I can't give them, my voice or my likes. And so I was like, that's not enough for me. I want to leave something This is yours. What you do with it is up to you, you know, but I'm building it for you. A piece of you to remember me, a piece of you to build on, etc. And that's when I started shifting my process and just working on myself to go, okay, how do I make that happen? So I've been doing a lot of work with that, you know, kind of going back to school, taking online courses, talking to a bunch of mentors, you know, taking a step back to learn and not feeling like I had to be the loudest or the smartest person in the room. Now if I'm the smartest person in the room, I go, oh, I'm in the wrong room. Oh, my bad, guys. You know, I need to go down the street or down the hall. And I gave myself permission to just kick down some doors and not like sit there and wait for someone to like hand me something. So
I love so much of what you're saying because I feel like it's one of the key ingredients missing in the communities of color. Is just there's very little still to this day that we're bringing into the future generation after generation, even houses.
Oh yeah.
It's just so I love exactly what you're saying, but how do you go from like you know, it sounds like you had a little bit of a better upbringing than a lot of children in families of color.
Yeah.
How do you go from that to say today building this? You've had to go back to school. You said what was kind of the mindset shift? And it sounds almost like it was an athlete saying, "I'm not going to lose this championship this time."
Yeah, exactly. That's a great metaphor for it. It was that kind of like I like almost, it's a terrible way to say it, but like kind of like tricked off a lot. You know, I had a lot of possibilities. I had a lot of access, and I still do, but I didn't take advantage of it. You know, I was just more so worried about being cute and, you know, making sure that my kids were good and, you know, traveling and things like that. And those are all things I think you should still do, and, you know, but when Matt and I divorced, I realized that I relied a lot on what he was giving me and what he would kind of allow me to have, right? My allowance or whatever. And I hated that feeling. I hated that I had to like really wait for him to make a decision to kind of like give me, you know, kind of the financial support. And I vowed, I think at that point, that I wasn't gonna put myself in that position again. I was kind of like, you know what? I don't like this. I almost felt like I was on the corner, you know, kind of being like someone else was telling me my value and my worth. And someone else had the power to kind of like shut things down. And I didn't like that feeling. It was a really hard feeling. It took me years to get out of that feeling and out of that situation. And today I will never put myself in that position again.
And do you think that came from not having a great sense of identity?
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. Going back, and it was weird because if you met most people and you asked them who I was when I was in high school, I was a very confident person. I was like overly confident, you know, it was like that arrogant, you know, person. So people were really surprised, especially my family. They were really surprised that they heard that I was in that type of like volatile relationship, because they were like, what? Like, because you would normally like, you know, put your dukes up. And it was like, yeah, but I was being chipped away at a little bit. You know, being a young mom, you give a lot of yourself to the babies, you know, kind of, then you try to figure out how to make a relationship work. So I did. I couldn't tell you who I was. And that's why I look back at the show and I go, I don't even recognize who that girl was. You know, there's pieces of me in there. And I think some of my most recognized pieces, like especially when I'm at lunch with Shawnee and things like that. But that's kind of like glimpses of this like, you know, kind of confident person. And that's, but it wasn't who I always was. And so it was just, yeah, I had no clue. I had no clue who I was.
Yeah. Do you feel like you and your husband today have shed that as far as how it defines parts of your relationship, or are there important things that you have taken forward with it?
I think we're ever evolving. And I certainly am not who I want to be in 10 years. And so I think when I got with Derek, I was a much more evolved, you know, kind of mature person. I was like in my, you know, 30s, 28. You know, I brought my 30s in with him actually, with Derek. And I had learned a lot from being in a relationship with Matt, but I still had a lot of stuff that I needed to work on, like a lot. Derek's 11 years older than me. And so, you know, his perspective was also different too. And so I took took some bad things from my relationship with Matt with me that I had to like still work on and figure out, silent treatment wasn't healthy, which is difficult because I love a good silent treatment. But there are some things that I learned from Matt that I shed and also didn't bring into that relationship either. So I think being with someone that allows you that kind of ever evolving roller coaster and just kind of, lets you be wherever you are at that time, is really important. Yeah.
What do you tell your kids about, like, because they have the internet, obviously, if they Google you, they're gonna find mom's history. Do they ever ask, or do you ever talk about it with them?
So the boys are 17, and I still share custody with Matt. We go 50-50. And I had like a 5 to 7 year divorce. It was really, really, really long, draining. Girl, I spent too much money on attorneys. And it actually, I was like, I'm gonna go back to school and become an attorney because this is but I know that they are aware, but they haven't asked for specifics. And so because of that, I haven't necessarily like broken it down for them. What I did make a decision on was that I didn't want to be responsible for the way that their relationship with their dad. The way that they viewed their dad and their relationship with their dad. I didn't want to necessarily tarnish that. Now, am I perfect? No. Do occasionally I kind of throw some petty comments in there? Absolutely. Till this day, I'm still like, and this guy, But I have never been like, let me tell you how much of a piece of your dad was, let me show you, pictures and da-da-da. Like, I haven't done that. There's just no need. But what I have hoped that I have demonstrated is strength and voice and how important it is to like stand up and be your own advocate. Sometimes I'm really good at that and sometimes I'm really bad. I think I've done it so much so that like even when Derek and I have an argument, they're kind of like, you guys argue? And I'm always like, yes, this is not perfect. We are not, just, leave it to Beaver here, guys. And so I've had to recognize that I need to put adversity in front of them too, and then show them how to deal with it or address it. Because otherwise, I don't want them to not be in a situation, go, well, my parents never argued, or they have a perfect relationship, and you're like, woo, let me tell you. So they've never asked. I've always told them when they turn 18, that if whatever they want to know, I'll be very transparent with them. But they haven't gotten there yet. And so I don't push it on them.
I think it's so important that the way that you've approached it and trying not to badmouth their dad as much as possible, because that relationship is going to go on for decades,
right.
Lord willing, and who knows which one of you will go first. But
to your point, I mean, again, not perfect. There are times where I'm like, see what I mean? Like, you're going to learn, like, you know what I mean? And so, but I do also let them know that like, I will be here, when there's disappointment in life. And also we have these kids blow my mind. All of our kids, they're so emotionally developed, girl, it's wild. That's things that they do. We did something and one of the boys said, well, I'm gonna compartmentalize that until the season's over. And I was like, excuse me? I was like, what in the SAT word is happening right now? I was like, oh, well, that's good, And the other one was very like emotionally like just stable and kind of like, well, I'm gonna approach it. And I was like, you just hit me with that. I'm going to approach it. I don't even approach it like that. I was like, well, right on, bro. But it was just kind of like a testament to, I think, the transparency, because I'm very transparent with my kids. I encourage people to be. I think what happens as a parent, we end up treating our kids like kids. And they're still people. They're still people with emotion. They're still people who are very aware. They may not have like the words or the vocabulary, but they still feel it internally, And so that was a thing for me. Because it takes every amount of strength in me not to go, you don't remember when your dad used to, what I mean? And I'm just like, oh, okay, yeah, no, if you guys want to, go with him, totally fine, And I'm in my journal like, and then they said, but it is wild. It is kind of crazy, this journey, and it never ends.
Yeah.
I asked my parents for like $5 like 2 weeks ago, girl, and I was like, damn, I guess parenting never ends. So I was like, but do you have singles? Because I'm gonna need to tip this guy real fast. So it's just wild. So they're doing great. All of the kids too. I mean, all of our middle, my blended family, like they come from a divorced side of things as well. That was always another thing too. I've never badmouthed their mom. I would always ask them, how's your mom? Tell your mom I said happy birthday, type of thing. Now I didn't communicate with the other moms, but I made sure that the kids didn't feel like they had to hide their relationship or downplay their relationship. It was like, no, your mom is sick. Like, okay, well, or you want to go visit your mom's not doing this or X, Y, and Z. And oftentimes I would tell them, you don't have to talk bad about your mom around me. You don't have to. You don't have to try to make me feel better. Like, I know. I know what I'm doing here, you know what I mean? And our love doesn't impede. So I've developed great relationships with my stepkids, my own. I call them my kids. So it's just important for me, for them to know that they shouldn't rely on their looks, or their sexiness or anything like that to try to bring in, or determine their value. And so education has been important for us, kind of like you go to, if college is for you, because I'm not saying it has to be for everyone, but if college is for you, we're going to go to school, we're going to develop something, you're going to have a good work ethic. And girl, these kids today, honey, let me tell you something, washing dishes is, like child abuse. And so, for them, I'm just like, it's just wild. And I'm grateful that we've been in a position to be able to provide for them. But I do feel like I'm making them a little softer.
So tell me about the businesses.
Oh, sure. Where I am today and having built these different businesses has really just been more about continuing to be an example for them and letting them know that, especially for my girls. We have 2 girls. I have failed at so many things. It's been amazing. I've been a restaurateur. I had 8 restaurants that I had to close during COVID, and that was hard. I had to file like bankruptcy. It was a whole mess, right, and disaster. I've coached before. I was in the cannabis space for a very long time. I'm still kind of moonwalking out of that cannabis space. What else have I done? Currently, I'm entrenched in sports. I have a hydration drink that we're doing. It's called Edge Hydration. I'm developing a sports complex, which I'm very excited about. And outside of sports, I'm developing obtainable housing in some of the municipalities here in LA. Because I do know, you had mentioned about housing and generational wealth, that we as in communities of Black and brown people have not had the same advantages, that other races have in that type of, generational wealth building. And I know that real estate has been the common thread in building that. So I want to try to be a part of changing that narrative. So that's been important for me too.
And I know with the real estate, I know you have a love of home. Like, let's talk about that.
Love a good home. I'm such a, when you walked in, I was like, yes, clean lines. I was like white
But
and
I wanted
neutrals.
to do this at your house, but we didn't quite get there yet.
I know. Next time. Yes.
I'm coming to visit
Next
you.
time, please.
What am I going to find when I come to visit you? What is
Oh my
Gloria's
goodness.
home?
It's so funny because my brothers, more importantly, like make fun of me because they're like, my house is white. It has a lot of actually these neutral colors, greens, natural plants everywhere. I love orchids, simple like pictures. Everything kind of like follows the door frames, I see lines. I hate clutter. What? My mom gets so mad at me because I'll be like, trash. She's like, I put it down 2 minutes ago. I'm like, well, this trash, just throw it away, recycle it. Like, what is happening right now? And it's funny because my brothers would like mess with me. They'll come, if they come to visit, they'll do something that they'll like move stuff around or they'll change my book so that they're, and I'll walk in and be like,
people don't get it when you've got the eye. It sees it.
And they'll be like, there's no way that they'll be like, they'll do this. And I'll be like, okay, I noticed it and I saw it. do it again, I'm gonna break your finger. You know what I mean? And they're kind of like, oh my God. But I just like order. I like visibility. You know, I want my space, like when I walk in, I want to be able to like inhale and just like exhale completely. I'm actually redoing my closet for that reason. And so, you know, it's just been, it's just super, I don't know, clean.
Yeah. No, I love it. I'm more of a minimalist kind of. I've always been that way since I was a little kid, though. But home, like home is really your base. Where does that come from? Like what? Like is it just from?
I think my parents, like coming from such a large family, you know, we always gathered at home. And my house was the home that everyone came to, you know, so I always had, my brothers had friends over, I had friends over. It was just where we went. And the kitchen more in particular, you know, was just where you kind of like where the snacks were and where you kind of just ended up gathering and where we do today. Like I have the open concept, you know, so, but like you'll find 20 people in the kitchen area, you know, leaning against something, you know, kind of like sitting on the counter and the things, you know, the chairs and things like that. But yeah, you're right, home is my base. And it's exactly, so when I go home, I want to be comfortable. You know, comfort to me is like, again, like it is minimal. It's really minimal.
What's your favorite room in the house?
Ooh, good question. I think I fight between my living room, or I guess kind of like what would be my family room, and my bedroom. Yeah, I've always been like I'm not that person that can stay in my room or stay in bed all day. You know, like I have to get out and things like that. But we have this really comfy couch in our master. And so I find myself there a lot because you'll see when you come over, we have this beautiful view. And so my family room has that view too. And so I kind of like snuggle in and like, I have a chair this big, like you'll find me in like the smallest position and like inside the couch or the chair. But I like that too, because then other people can join me.
Yeah, I feel like I want to ask you so much more.
Oh, I'll come back. I'll come back, girl. You got me. When we go to the house, you can dive all in.
Is there anything nobody's ever asked you that I should have asked you? Like you're like, if she would have asked me that, I would have answered this.
Oh man, honestly, you know, I'm an open book. Yeah, I legit. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't. I'm learning to use my voice a little bit more because I realize that it's not even just about having a lot to say, like people need to hear my opinion, but I do find that I feel like I've already lived, if I was a cat, I've already lived like 6 lives. You know what I mean? Like, so I feel like, people are always like, I feel like people think I'm lying because I relate to a lot. Like when someone goes, I used to, and I'm like, yeah, girl, I used to skydive too. Isn't that crazy? You know, and then they'll be like, oh man, I used to mountain bike. I'm like, I'm trying to get to Mount Everest too. This is why. And so people are kind of like, okay, girl, like chill out. And I'm like, no, there's so many things, you know, I literally was waitressing at 12. You know what I mean? I was in positions and things, and I've seen and done, you know, my brother was one of the biggest drug dealers in Oakland. I have done and seen some shit. Right. And so, you know, I was the one of 3 black girls in school. Like, it's just so many things that I can kind of relate to. And I just feel like I haven't, like, because my voice is so important, I haven't blessed everybody, no. But I do, I kind of end up finding myself in positions where I do relate. And so ask me anything.
Well, you know, and that's how we got here today, really, was I heard you speaking at an event, and, you know, you were talking about the podcast that you're doing, which we didn't get a chance to really talk about, too, sure. Which is sports related. And just the way that you had approached it and what you were trying to do with it, that's about using your voice. Is that why you started that platform?
Yes, the podcast was huge to me, especially because a lot of women, and this was, you know, gosh, we had the idea in 2018, you know, right when COVID started. But the idea was that a lot of women, especially at the time, back then, didn't necessarily have a voice in sports, and that was so annoying considering someone that was so influenced by sports, and my kids and my families, you know, we gather because of sports and all the things, that I was like, wait a minute, there's a lot of things, you know, that women aren't necessarily being allowed to say. And more importantly, those who were interested in learning, just being a little older as an adult, another parent or things like that would constantly come up to me and be like, okay, I didn't play soccer, you know, but it sounds like you know something about soccer. What's happening? And then I'd end up having to break down the game or, explain basketball to them or the difference between football and, and flag football or tackle and things like that. And so when my girlfriend and I started it, I was just like, it just made sense. And she is like, you're a sports
The
girl.
X's and O's, yeah.
Well, let me tell you something. That girl,
Yeah.
and I like color, I'll be like, oh, he's cute. Okay, leggings, like woohoo. But in addition to some just education, so to just originally started just to give women an opportunity to just pick up a little bit, kind of have that water cooler fact or, that sports bar, kind of moment, and then kind of moonwalk out of it and be like, y'all do a thing. I just wanted to mention blah, blah, blah. And then, but it's grown into so much more. We thought it was going to be a lot of women, and at first it was, but now majority of our audience are guys.
Isn't
and
it
I love
funny?
that.
I don't know if I love it or hate it. But
It's fair.
Because I wanted to start a community for women.
Yeah.
I was doing sports and design on somebody else's podcast, and it was almost all guys.
Isn't that
And I'm
wild?
like, but when I wanted to call someone, I kind of want another woman.
Yeah. No, it was interesting, but I also kind of find myself being like, all right, guys, like y'all want to know just as much as our girls.
They
Yes.
do. They want to, and especially since I do the design part, they want to know what height their TV should be at.
Yes.
They want to know, is sofa too far from the TV for the distance? What side? They want to
Yeah.
know all this home stuff.
They
In fact,
do.
one of the guys, he gave the best comment. He said, "Oh, I'm going to have to tell my wife we need to rearrange the room."
I love that because it's so true.
Yeah.
Yes, no, and when we grew up, like I did home ec, right? So the guys kind of got to learn how to bake and do a thing, and
Okay, I never did home ec. My dad and mom would not let me do home ec.
Oh yeah, no, girl, because my mom was like, look here now, I'm tired of having to cook for y'all, so someone get their shit
Well,
together.
I was already cooking by the time I was probably 6. So
Oh, okay.
I was like, we were, in survival mode.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
want to eat, brother? I'm going to do the cooking. It wasn't very pretty, but.
No, we had cereal. That was our cooking, and then we had to learn. Yes.
I want to leave us on though, like as you're talking, I always ask my guests one word to describe them, and the word that's coming to me does not do you justice, because the word that's coming to me is survivor, but that does not do you justice.
I appreciate that, but survivor is that's strength and resilience, and I take that as a compliment, because I am a survivor, and it may not be as ugly as other survival stories, and so I understand that, but that still doesn't take away from the reality that we have survived. All of us are survivors in some way, shape, or form. So I appreciate that.
I so appreciate you coming on today.
No, thank you. And I have so much more to say, so she's going to bring me back. So.
Okay, yes, she's coming back.
Yeah,
We
we'll
might
do
be
it from
going
the
to her
house.
Out
Exactly.
of the studio.
Exactly.
Thank you so much
No,
for
thank you.
today.
Thank
I
you,
really
thank you.
appreciate
No,
it.
you've been great.
Oh my
This is
gosh,
awesome.
this
Congratulations.
was so fun.
This is
We're
awesome.
getting there.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Game Day with Shay. Subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss a thing. Catch you next time.